Welcome to the Movies That Matter Oscar Show. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Lexy.
And I'm Stacy.
And I'm Justin.
All right, so we're going to talk about the Oscar nominees. We're going to cover a few categories. We're going to talk about screenplay, cinematography, director, and picture for this episode. This is not a prediction. This is just our thoughts. So I will kick things off. We had a very unlively and quite boring discussion about the difference between adapted screenplay and original screenplay, of which I still think is completely, the nuances of this category escape me. I don't see the point. So we're going to do them all as one. So under adapted, we have American Fiction, Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Zone of Interest. Under original, Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Maestro, May, December, and Past Lives. And I know we haven't seen them all, but thoughts on the nominees?
Well, all right, I'll hop in because I haven't seen all of them, but I have seen 6 of them, and I thought overall, out of the ones I saw, I understood why they were all nominated for Best Screenplay. I didn't think there was any of the ones that were, well, actually, let me take that back. 5 out of the 6 I thought were really good. One, Maestro was just kind of meh to me. I mean, I understand like the way it was filmed, that was kind of cool, but I didn't think the screenplay was all that exciting. Felt like it would have been better if it had been focused more on the wife than on Bradley Cooper's character. But the other 5 that I did see, I really liked. I thought all of them had great screenplays.
Okay. Lexi, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think, there are definitely some on here that I liked more than others, but I would agree with Justin that Maestro is, I would think, does not deserve to be on a lot of these lists, which you'll see as a theme from me throughout these episodes. Because I didn't even finish it because I was so bored when I was watching it. And it ranked lowest on my personal ranking of the Best Picture nominees. In particular, Anatomy of a Fall, I think, is very strong because for that movie, it's a mystery. You don't know whether or not she actually killed her husband. And I think the movie does a really good job of revealing different things at different times, for at least for me as a viewer to, I'm thinking about it one way, maybe in the beginning, and then I think about it a different way as a certain thing gets revealed, and I think about it a different way as more stuff gets revealed. I think the order of reveals, and then also the fact that I was worried that the courtroom part of it was going to get really boring, and I was not bored watching it. And so I think that screenplay in particular is quite strong.
Stacy, you want to give your thoughts?
Sure. On screenplay, sure. I enjoyed Maestro more than my compatriots here, but I also liked Barbie. I pretty much like Barbie best for everything, though, so you're going to hear that again. But the screenplay in particular, I just thought was brilliant and different from what we normally get to see in theaters. I thought the last hour of Oppenheimer could have been cut. So to me, that's a huge screenwriting blunder that happened, and it doesn't deserve to be on the list. But those are just the ones that stand out to me.
Yeah, I'm going to obviously second your opinion on Oppenheimer. It doesn't deserve to be on the list. For those of us who didn't understand the historical context of the movie didn't explain it. So we talked about in the episode, it was like, I had no idea what the stakes were, and it wasn't clear at all in the movie. The tedious discussions, just, I said it, were tedious. And this is a thing I'm going to come back to with Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan is really brilliant technically, and his movies lack any kind of emotional center. Oppenheimer, the character, was an utter blank, whereas Oppenheimer, the real person, was, and really big a-hole, all historical accounts put it. We talked on the episode about like the womanizing thing not coming across remotely at all. I would not F that man. I would not, because it's like not totally unsexy. A lot of choices led up to that, but ultimately like a failure in writing as well. Um, I'm with you on Barbie. It was funny. It was sweet. The jokes just really landed, which is what you want in a comedy. But I think it's tough. I really loved American Fiction, and I've talked about that. Adam read the book, and we kind of talked about some of the things that were in the book versus the movie. I think the centerpiece of that movie was the conversation that the two authors have, and their different perspectives about having to be a Black author and what it means to sell out in that way. And I thought that conversation was so brilliantly written because you were like, I see both of their points and they're both right. Like neither of them are wrong. And this was a really nuanced, great way to handle this topic and not sell out, like not cop out on give easy answers. I thought that movie, there were just so many little grace notes in the writing, like him calling his mother, which is the worst. Justin?
Yeah, so I saw six out of the films on this list. The two that really stood out to me the most, well, really three stand out. One in a negative way, two in a positive. So I'll start with the one I didn't care for as much. That was Maestro. So very much echoing Lexi's sentiments on that. I just thought it just wasn't the greatest screenplay in my opinion. But the two that I really liked were American Fiction and Past Lives. American Fiction, I thought was just fantastically written, and as you point out, like that conversation, there were so many different scenes in that movie that I just like. It just spoke to me on multiple levels, and it was just very relatable. And then with Past Lives, I thought that was like an excellent screenplay as well. Just given like the dynamics, like I really felt, especially with the two main characters, the childhood friend from Korea, and then the main protagonist. I'm blanking on their names at the moment. But they had very like visceral and like I felt like strong like human connection. So the fact that I felt that from the story, I just think was a credit to the screenplay. And from what I understand, it was semi autobiographical by the director.
Okay.
I agree with you on Past Lives as well, that it's definitely a quieter movie and sometimes a quieter romance, depending on, typical romances that you might think of. And I'm sometimes not always one for a movie like that quiet, but I think, yeah, the director and the screenplay was done really well to pace out their relationship and really make you still feel a lot throughout the movie.
Yeah, I mean, characterization is such a big part of telling a good story. And sometimes, which I will credit Emily Blunt with, like a really good actor can kind of fill in the holes in mediocre writing, right? They can bring a lot to the part that wasn't on the page. To me, that's a mark of a truly great actor is like, can you elevate pretty lousy material? But I just think that when you look at what some of the greater screenplays on this list really did, it's just they just created these fully formed people that you knew so well. And I think again, yeah, I'm with you on American Fiction. I didn't see Past Lives. I'd say Barbie. I'd say honestly, The Holdovers did a really good job. I had issues with the movie, which we'll get into as we get through the other categories, but not with the writing. I thought the writing was really good.
Yeah, I think for The Holdovers, very, very wholesome movie, I think, overall. And then, yeah, watch the writing and how they build up Paul Giamatti and the kid's relationship throughout, how the kid really transforms throughout the movie, I think was a really big part of what made it so good.
Yeah. I mean, it's much more of a character study than some of the other movies, right? So it's like you just really each person is so embodied by the script. All right. So if you had to pick your favorite,
Well,
Stacy,
one comment before we pick favorites, if we're ending the discussion. I'm curious did anyone else see Zone of Interest?
I didn't get around to that one.
Okay, because I hadn't really gotten a full, because yeah, a lot of my friends have not seen it, and so I haven't really gotten a full grasp of how other people feel about that movie. Because generally, when I watch reviewers, people really like it, and I do think it is a good movie. But there are parts of it that I don't quite understand. I don't really know why they were there. And I think in terms of relating to screenplay, I forget if it's original or adapted, but
it's original.
oh, okay. So
oh no, Zone of Interest is adapted. My mistake.
Okay, so I don't know about the source material for Zone of Interest.
Right.
But there's a particular part of the plot where there's a girl who is running around and she seems to be collecting things, near it takes place near Auschwitz, and so she's collecting things near the concentration camp, and you see a couple scenes with her and it's very specifically edited. And nothing ever comes of that. And I don't really then know why those scenes were in there in the first place, because I couldn't really find maybe I just don't understand what the meaning was supposed to be behind them or what the intention was supposed to be behind them, because it's really more focused on this family that is, the father's a guard or the head of Auschwitz, and then the family lives right next to Auschwitz. Then this little girl who's doing something totally separate is not really ever addressed besides her scenes. And so that was a part that really fell flat for me for that movie. And I don't know really why they did it that way, but maybe someone in the audience who's listening can fill me in.
Leave a comment. Yeah. Any final thoughts? Sorry, I should have done that from the first place before we pick our faves. So you can pick your fave. If you want to predict a winner, go right ahead. I don't like making predictions, but feel free. Stacy?
Oh, Barbie.
Okay. Is that your favorite and your prediction for winner, or just your favorite?
Oh, that's just my favorite. No, it'll be, I think Oppenheimer and Poor Things are going to win everything.
Okay. Justin?
My favorite was American Fiction.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as winners go, I feel confident that Oppenheimer will be winning.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my favorite was probably Anatomy of a Fall, but as we discussed, there's a lot of good ones on there. In terms of winners, I mean, I think I definitely agree with some sentiment that the Academy is probably going to pick Oppenheimer or Poor Things for whatever their respective screenplay categories are. And I did like Poor Things, but it's not my favorite on the list.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm really torn, but I'm gonna give a very movies that matter answer and pick Barbie. As in, the cultural impact of this movie was so huge that I think it should really win that category. But I did really love American Fiction. It's not an easy choice to make between the two. All right, let's talk cinematography. Anybody want to read out the nominees?
I'll read them.
All right.
So for
The
best,
joke required, you got to do the Oscar thing where you make some sort of dumb pun that everybody hates.
oh, well, I didn't prepare any riddles or limericks to go along with this. So for best cinematography, the nominees are El Conde, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things.
Kick us off, Justin.
Sure. So with this category, I only saw Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, and Oppenheimer, so can't really speak about El Conde or Poor Things. But out of all of these, I did think so. Even though I wasn't the biggest fan of Maestro's screenplay, I did think the way it was shot and the cinematography was actually pretty good. That I did think they did a very good job with in that film. So I do have something positive to say about it. Oppenheimer and Kills of the Flower Moon, I also thought were like very beautifully shot films. So out of the rest, all of them were like enjoyable, but I think the one that I like the best out of those probably would be Killers of the Flower Moon. because I think they just did a really good job of like shooting and like the setting, and it just it just kind of jumped out to me, at least from the film screen. Oppenheimer I did like as well, but I think Killers of the Flower Moon was the one that really grabbed me the most in this category.
Okay. Lexi, joined by Ellie.
Yes. Hello, sweet girl. Um, yeah, so I've seen all of them except for El Conde. And I would agree with Justin that I think this is the one category that I probably would put Maestro in. And I think it is more deserving because, you know, they have some of these really great pan shots at the beginning and with some of the lighting that they do throughout the film and it really does, I think, at parts of it make you feel like you're in a movie from the 50s or that you're watching a movie from the 50s. So in that sense, I think it did a good job and is deserving of this nomination. I think Poor Things was very fun to watch visually. And some of this may be attributable to set design rather than cinematography and costuming, but it's so colorful. And the way that I don't know exactly what they're doing, but the worlds that or this different scenes that you're moving through look so interesting in that they don't quite look real, but are real enough for the movie to keep flowing along. And just, I think, also framing the way that Emma Stone as Bella Baxter moves, you know, sometimes across the scene and everything. I think that Poor Things is probably one of my top in the category. But I also liked, I think all the nominees in this, I haven't seen El Conde, but all the nominees I think are particularly good in this category.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually align with everything y'all said. And we'll just highlight as Lexi kind of pointed out, I'm never quite sure in a couple of cases, like Poor Things in particular, where cinematography and like production design, where the one begins and the other one ends. I'm not, yeah, I'm fuzzy on that. I would think that Poor Things, it would have been a lot of it that artistry would be due to the set design and maybe even some visual effects for backgrounds and things. But and then also directing at a certain point, I'm like, well, actually, you know, like good on the cinematographer for executing the shot, but especially Maestro and Poor Things, I'm thinking a lot of the genius there is actually, I want to save that for when we talk about directing. But so I guess I'm confused on this category for these particular, like actually for Killers of the Flower Moon and Oppenheimer, it makes more sense to me. Like they were, you know, cinematography, the DP is really good there. But yeah, I'm going to save some of my comments for, I think, directing on this one.
Yeah, I think it's tough, like with this category when I mean, I think Killers of the Flower Moon kind of is so separate from the other nominees. Again, I didn't see El Conde either, though, where you're like, you have like sweeping vistas to film and it's that kind of movie. And you're like, ugh, those kind of always tend to be sort of Oscar favorites when you have, you know, a lot of like land to film. Like there's a lot you can do. And it was really well done in Killers of the Flower Moon. I agree. And then also then that had to do with production design as well, because it's like, what are you filming? This is probably the only one that I might give to Oppenheimer because, like I said, I mean, I think Christopher Nolan is an absolute craftsman, but it's all technique. Like, there's just nothing else to his movies for me, which is why I don't like them. So I thought, you know, the filming of the bomb, I thought the cinematography was really well done. That is what he does well. So this is, yeah, it's like I can't say I feel like I have a clear winner on this one. There was nothing that really stood out to me other than, so for me, without jumping ahead, one of the best, if not the best movies I saw this year was Across the Spider-Verse. And it's like no animated film will ever get to be in this category. I get that.
Unfortunately
But
not.
yeah, but if you think of the
Um,
cinematography, if you think of the way the shots were designed and then animated, all those different worlds. And again, I haven't seen it again. The thing that always struck me is when he at the end is in his not quite right universe, there's a gut instinct that I had. I was like, this feels not right. Like I could feel it. And I couldn't put my finger on until the mom's green eyes came up. Like I couldn't figure out quite what was different. And I thought just all the creation of all the different worlds, all the ways that it was shot, even as an animated film, I'm like, honestly, I'd give it to that. I give it to Across the Spider-Verse. Like if I had to pick.
Yeah, if it was the nominee, I would definitely say hands down it should win. But
and
Yeah.
I think that kind of comes back to the question of like, well, what does cinematography mean? I guess it means the whole like, hey, which lens do I use and where do I place this camera? But kind of the artistry of the frame composition is what I think we're picking up on here, and that's something that, yeah, definitely a lot of animated films deserve recognition for.
Right. I mean, and you don't have something like the 1917 where you have something that was really just a tour de force of cinematography, right? It, none of them are bad, but none of them are like Lawrence of Arabia either. So, yeah, I'm kind of like I don't have a real pick in this category.
Yeah, I think I'd probably be, happy that any of them would win and just be like, great.
Good for them.
Yeah. So for Best Director, we have Justine Triet or Triet. I don't know if it's Triet or Triet, but for Anatomy of a Fall, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, and then Jonathan Glazer for Zone of Interest.
All right. So is now the time we want to talk about the pink elephant in the room?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think there are multiple directors that could have been on this list instead of some other directors. Particularly, yeah, Greta Gerwig, not nominated for Best Director for Barbie. Barbie is on Best Picture, but not Greta Gerwig for Best Director, which I think is disappointing. And then also, I think Celine's Song for Past Lives could have been on this list as well. I think, Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall, good choice. I think Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, good choice. And then Martin Scorsese, Christopher Nolan, and Jonathan Glazer, I think, are more questionable to me in terms of being on this list. I think for some of the reasons we mentioned of, Oppenheimer, that third act, while had interesting parts, really dragged in the context of the whole film. And I think for Killers of the Flower Moon, I had mixed feelings on it. I do think it was also long. I think it was one of the tighter 3-hour movies that I've seen compared to other ones. I didn't find myself as bored as like Babylon was like way too long and I did not like. And then Zone of Interest I thought was really good, but I just had some smaller issues with certain parts of that story.
Yeah, so everyone is calling it a snub. I don't know. Thought about kind of like how you want to define that, but I definitely do think when you have sort of a critical mass of Oscar nominations, it's like, okay, you like the acting, you like the screenplay, you liked the costumes, you like the production design, but you think the person who chose all of that and put it together didn't do that good a job. Like, I think that is like a much clearer case for like a snub. And I do think it was a snub. I do think it was ridiculous that Greta Gerwig didn't get it. I do also think to your point about past lives, it was like, well, we nominated a woman. We're good. We're done. Couldn't possibly have two women nominees. Like that would just be crazy. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think
if they met their quota.
Right, because I thought Greta Gerwig was the smash in automatic one woman, and then when they had Justine Triet there, I was like, whoa, what a surprise.
Right. And also very undiverse group of people as well.
Yeah, it does feel like they felt like they filled their quota the last couple of years for Oscars, So White, and getting a few women in there, and now they're just like, they're not due for another couple seasons, So we threw them a bone, so they need to just chill while we give the big boys their proper adulations. I have particular problems with Yorgos Lanthimos and with Poor Things. Just the fact that it was Barbie and Poor Things were essentially the same story of a manufactured woman having an existential journey, right? And discovering what it means to be herself, to be a woman. And one of those films was directed by a man, and the character is constantly being defined at every stage via her relationships and interactions with men, like how she relates to men and what the men think of her, and if they want to have sex with her, and if they get to marry her. And the entire thing was all about this toddling dope, wandering through the world asking men to tell her who she is. And then there's one queer connection in the whole movie, and it's kind of just blipped over. We don't learn anything about her female partner. We just watch them have a physical intimate moment for a bit, and then they just kind of walk around together like schoolgirls, and we never learn anything about her. And I just have a huge, and also who went and saw, a few people saw it because they heard it got nominated for a lot of things, but there was it just cannot hold a candle to Barbie in any sense. In that, when you think of it as a story of a woman learning what it is to be herself and to be a woman, Barbie just is better. It's just better. And it's because it was directed by Greta Gerwig. That is why.
Yeah.
And so I have deep problems, issues with this snub. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the record, and Justin, I'll let you go. The Lobster was the second movie that Stacy and I ever made an episode on. I have not seen a movie by him since, because I hated that movie so much. So if you want to flash back to that episode and find out why I hate Yorgos Lanthimos, but I was like, I do not trust you to handle any material ever again. So I didn't see it, and I'm sure it was bad.
So I think we're all unanimous here that Greta Gerwig did get snubbed. And the analogy I used when I was having some conversations with some friends about the nominations with this was that it reminded me very much of the college football playoff. And this analogy is going to make sense after I get a chance to elaborate. So you have 10 Best Picture nominees and 5 Best Director nominations. The math just doesn't match. Just like with college football, you've got the playoff. You have 4 spots, but you have 5 Power 5 conferences. So if you have 5 undefeated champions, one of them's going to get left out. And I feel like Greta Gerwig essentially got the Florida State treatment this year, where they finished the regular season undefeated, but they weren't in the playoffs. And when you look at it, it just shows you that you have a system that is the numbers just don't add up. Like I said, you have 10 best picture nominees, but only 5 directors. So 5 people are going to be left off, and she definitely got snubbed this year for it. So that was the analogy I used for friends that were familiar with sports and movies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what I dislike so much about the Oscars. Like, there's a level of politics at play that just seems utterly baffling to me, right?
Yeah,
Like,
they're running campaigns here.
and it's like, obviously, I'm a movie snob. If you're like 100 plus episodes in by now, you should know that about me. So I'm like, if it was just a like someone just being uber pretentious and trying to pick art, like, okay, there have been significant issues with sort of that, but I'm like, you're not doing that. I don't know what you're doing. You're just doing it. You're just being like, this movie was by a lady about lady things, so like, no nominee for her. And you're like, that sucks.
100%. And her, she would make in interviews would make kind of she would give support for the fact that she was drawing from a cinematic like historical legacy that was
Yeah.
just as relevant as I do want to say. Look, I do want to say, Poor Things. It was a very cool homage to neo-expressionism from like the silent era and like Metropolis and Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. That was very cool, right? But those films are considered classics by all the folks that decide what classics are. Greta Gerwig was pulling from like the French musicals of the mod era, from the 40s musicals of is it Gene Kelly? With
Singing in the Rain was a big influence. Yeah.
Right,
Which
with
is
the
a
Dream
classic by
Ballet.
everyone. One of my favorite movies. Yeah. Keep going.
And lots of other films that she could point to, Wizard of Oz, whatever. They're all great. And when they were made, it was no easy feat. And they're excellent works, but they're all girly, right? They're all feminine. They're all films that women and what do they say? She's, theys, and gays, right? Like they will never be considered legitimate the way friggin' Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is, although no one wants to watch it.
Yeah.
But just because they've got singing and dancing and pretty dresses in them, it's misogynist. It's just misogynist. She is just as legit and is doing things that are just as interesting as the other directors on the list, and was just not recognized for it.
Yeah, and I'll take this opportunity to once again call out Martin Scorsese, who I think profits off of human misery, and I dislike that about his career. But he is a dude, and he makes dude films. Like that is what he does. I do not think that he was the right person to take on the story of Killers of the Flower Moon. He made a story about white dudes when it should have been a story about the Osage generally and the Osage women specifically. And so I'm not going, yeah, like he gets no kudos from me for making Killers of the Flower Moon. Like I don't think he was the right director for that project, and I would love to see something in that vein by an Indigenous director and even a female Indigenous director. So yeah, I don't like this category.
Yeah, I think, Nicole, did you and I chat about this a bit? Yeah, like we didn't. I personally was, had no problem with Martin Scorsese's choices and the story he chose to tell, because, as you said, like that's the kind of story he tells, right? The problem was, yeah, like let's have a story told by an auteur that's an own from own voices would have been more interesting, I think, for people to hear about.
Yeah, I think I agree with Justin's analogy, because I like with two categories as intrinsically connected as director and picture, it is kind of difficult to have one be 5 and then one be 10, because then it's almost like, okay, here are the actual 5 best that we think there are, because we're choosing best director, which is less people and they're, I guess, maybe inherently more competitive of a category. And yeah, I think the unfortunate part about this Oscars process is that, yeah, they're all campaigning. I mean, I don't think Maestro would be on there in as many categories if campaigning were not a thing. And as we'll discuss in the acting categories, I have multiple other people who I think could be there instead of Bradley Cooper or Carey Mulligan.
Yeah, and like it failed its brief, right? The whole point of adding to 10 was to get popular movies in there, right? So who's on this list, which we will read out no one saw the holdovers. So they brought in the category and then just packed it with a bunch of indie films that nobody saw. Again, and I love an indie film, obviously, but I'm just sort of like, you did this because you were supposed to bring in popular movies, and then you utterly failed to bring in popular movies. Like, go back to 5 because this doesn't make any sense.
I liked Poor Things. I do see Stacy's points about lens and choices in the movie. I remember during the scene where she's talking with the woman who like kind of owns this whorehouse, that I was like, oh, like this is good. I wonder if it is a lot about Bella's relationship to men in the movie because that's who's around her, and she by the construction of the scenes that we have in the movie, that is who is around her, and so that's who, unfortunately, we're going to have for this film. And yeah, I think less time on Mark Ruffalo, even though I thought Mark Ruffalo was very good. I think maybe less time on Mark Ruffalo and more time with her finding women figures would have served the film well. And yeah, more time with the queer relationship. I think we know like a little bit about her, that she like went to school or something, but that they're involved in the socialist movement together. But I still think it was still an overall, in terms of the director, I think he still did a good job of bringing all these pieces of the story, the set design, bringing in great actors and letting them like do their thing. And so I think I'm glad that he's there, but I do see the other criticisms of different parts of the movie.
So who would you give the best director award to?
If we're just thinking of everyone, who would I give it to? I'd probably give it to Greta Gerwig or Justine Triet, because I thought, both those movies were constructed so well, and I think they did a good job.
Okay.
I think we all know how I feel.
Well, based off the list, at least for the ones who were nominated for Best Director, I'd actually would give it to Christopher Nolan. I really liked Oppenheimer, but as far, I think he's
the lone male voice.
Hey, if Greta Gerwig had been nominated, I would. That's who would get my vote. It's out of this. So I was basing my response out of who was actually nominated, but I do think she did a fantastic job with Barbie, and that she did get snubbed. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I would give it to Greta Gerwig. She made the movie of 2023, unquestionably.
Okay. For Best Picture, we've got American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, The Zone of Interest. Barbie. I think I've made myself clear by now. That film is brilliant. And as you said, it was the film of 2023. It started a global movement. People are buying friggin' pink Birkenstocks all over the planet. It just, I won't beat a dead horse. You know where I stand on this.
Okay. Justin?
My favorite picture out of this list is actually American Fiction. I thought that movie was, I'd say, the best one that I watched out of all of these on the list. And there are a lot of very good movies on here. The only ones I didn't see were Anatomy of a Fall, Poor Things, and Zone of Interest. So out of the ones I did watch, I enjoyed pretty much all of them. Except my show was the most meh. out of this list. But American Fiction was one that I just really like when I left watching it, I just really thought that was the best film that I had seen like all year for this, at least for the Academy nominations. But also really enjoyed Oppenheimer and Barbie. Didn't see them both at the same time, but I thought they were both very enjoyable films. But yeah, out of this bunch, American Fiction, it has my vote.
Okay. Anything on there, not on there that you would have liked to have seen added?
Yes, Into the Spider-Verse, or sorry, Across the Spider-Verse, and also Godzilla minus one. I thought that was an incredibly well done film, and I felt like that got snubbed at the Oscars. I think it maybe got nominated for something technical, but it wasn't even on
It
like
did, yeah.
it wasn't even nominated for like best foreign film, which I thought was the best foreign film that I watched this past year.
Okay.
Yeah, and you actually felt for you connected to the human characters. Like Godzilla was more of this just like force of nature and menace in the background. But I've watched a lot of Godzilla movies, and for most of them, the human's like, "Yeah, you're here, but like, just get out the way. I want to watch Godzilla stomp some stuff." But this one, I really connected with the human characters there, so that's why I vote for one that got the big snub.
First expanding on the Godzilla minus one, I agree that that is a movie that definitely could have been in this best picture list for all the reasons that Justin said. It was very good. And actually, I think because of that focus on the human characters, I meant to bring Godzilla minus one would have been a good addition to, I guess, original screenplay. Whatever category it's meant to fit in.
Adapted.
I guess it's part of a big franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess Godzilla minus one, I think, is one that could have definitely been in adapted screenplay and been well deserved in that category. I did a ranking of all the Best Picture nominees since I was able to watch all of them.
All right.
And I won't. I guess I'll summarize. Like I think in terms of the films that I really liked. I had Anatomy of a Fall at number one. I had Poor Things up there, Past Lives, Barbie, Holdovers, and American Fiction.
Give us the actual ranking.
Okay. Well, I guess that was the ranking.
Okay.
So yeah, number one was Anatomy of a Fall. 2 was Poor Things. 3 was Past Lives. 4 was Barbie. 5 was The Holdovers. 6 was American Fiction. And I think those movies I really liked all of those movies. And then kind of going farther down the list. Zone of Interest, Oppenheimer, and Killers of the Flower Moon. I liked parts of them. I liked significant parts of them. Thought some things were off or maybe could have been done better, relating to particular things. And then Maestro was at the end because obviously I couldn't finish it and didn't like it. And then in terms of other movies that I saw this year that I thought could have made it to this list, I really liked May, December. It was a creepy, weird movie, but I thought it was so good. Particularly the sound and like some of the soundtrack choices were really good in that movie. And some of the acting, which I'll talk about later as well. And then All of Us Strangers was definitely more of an artsy movie, but I would say the romance and the kind of conflict at the center of it were done very well, and the acting was very good. So All of Us Strangers, I think, was a really good movie of the year. And then I also loved, Godzilla minus one, as Justin said, and then I also loved Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Yeah, I was thinking about what was on my list. And I think kind of tackling the sort of nominees first, you all know at this point what I liked and didn't like. I would say for the holdovers, I had a writing teacher once tell me there are only 7 original stories and Shakespeare covered them all. So you have the older person has a child come into their life and it changes them and the child. That's a pretty standard plot line. I don't think that The Holdovers was the freshest take on it either. And there's so many male boarding school movies too to overcome. I was just I thought it was a very nice film, But I was like, it just doesn't stand out in any way for me. Unlike I always joke about Sideways, I'm like, I learned everything I needed to know about male relationships from that movie. Like that was an indie film that I'm like, this really was different and it stood out. So I was sort of like, I don't, it's not that it was a bad movie, but I was sort of like, I don't know what it's doing on this list. And I think there were a few of them on there that I was like, um, for me, like I said, if you start to have to make choices, and I'm assuming Across the Spider-Verse figured going for Best Picture was too big a risk and they should safely go with animated. I don't think you can take both categories. I don't know the technicalities, but um, it was just such a great film. And I'm like, it's absolutely one of the best films that I saw this year. And I'm actually surprised you said it, Lexi, because I was thinking about all the movies I saw this year. And one of the most memorable ones was for me, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And that's just a movie. Like, again, here's a little indie film about girls. Funny how a little indie film about girls doesn't make this list, right? And it's just so obvious about where the tastemakers get to decide who they think is worth making movies about or featuring. And it's really disappointing that you're going to expand the category and just keep making the same stupid picks. Like I was like, I don't see the point in this remotely at all. But yeah, I mean, obviously, of the movies this year, of what I saw, I would give it to Barbie as from either the list or the non-list.
I'm glad you pointed that out, Nicole. I am at a point. I know a lot of people were already there, but I have reached the point where I just don't know if I'll ever watch the Oscars again, including this year. I I just find them to be completely irrelevant at this point, and I'm not sure why any of us are looking to them to find out which movies we should think are good or important. It used to feel like movies about women and girls didn't get attention because they would always blame the market, right? They'd always blame, oh, well, 13-year-old boys choose what we watch, during the summer or whatever. Men make decisions about, what the couple's going to go see when they buy the tickets. And that's clearly not it, because that's not what they have to worry about when they select these films. They've chosen a bunch of these, like as you pointed out, obscure indie films. It has nothing to do with market pressure. It has everything to do with just, as you said, who is making these choices. And it's clearly not representative of Earth's population. And I just have completely lost interest in what any of them feel about anything.
Right. And they're driving themselves into irrelevance, right? Like we're movie people and we don't want to they already lost kind of the mainstream audience. I mean, we all know they lost me in the 90s, but yeah, I mean, what is it? I don't, no one's going to watch this broadcast at all anymore if they don't start to improve.
Yeah. If you can make a film like Across the Spider-Verse and it doesn't get included in a 10 set, I don't have time for you. I just don't have time for you anymore.
I agree that they're definitely losing their cultural relevance, and I think they've made some choices over the last couple of years to try and remedy some of that. But yeah, I mean, with the combination of people not having cable, people not going to the movies as much anymore, or at least to the theater, and the lack of diversity and, relevance around some of these picks, they're definitely in a danger spot. I think the Oscars do still carry some weight in terms of, being able to help people's careers, especially if an up-and-comer kind of gets nominated and is able to be put on the map. I think that can still be helpful. But then, yeah, as they lose their relevance and what people bring in for box office numbers, it may not even matter as much anymore. Because I think they've also tried to make strides with the Academy and who's voting, but I mean, I guess it's hard to enforce, but there's no requirement that people have to watch all of the stuff in the categories that they're voting. I mean, even we're one example of that. Like, we're going to do this episode and not all of us have even watched all the films, and we do this for fun. So like, there's more leeway there for that, obviously. But it is crazy to me that the people who are literally voting are not required to watch all of these films and make an informed choice.
Yeah, that ties to the point I raised earlier. How ultimately this is all about, like, it's a campaign that, like, studios or people are running. And
Yeah,
I've read comments in the past where people say, "Well, oh, I know so and so," or like, and so yeah, I just voted for that film. It's wild, but that's ultimately how that sausage is getting made.
Again, I actually don't care if they drive themselves into irrelevance. But I guess I do think that you're right, Lexi. Like, because it does have the power to boost smaller voices, I think, and now I'm going to talk against my own point about having all these indie films on Best Picture. Like, because it does have that power, like, I'm sure a whole bunch of people who never would have seen Moonlight saw Moonlight. Great, wonderful. That is power exercised well and deservingly. But I think that we want great performances or great, we want these movies to be recognized in some way. It's like, I still kind of want some sort of awards thing, but I don't want this. This I don't want.
right. And maybe someone else knows Oscars history better than I do, because I wonder if, like, at the beginning I don't even know if it was televised. I guess it was also the 30s, so, but maybe it'll get to be a point where it scales down and it's just like, okay, we're giving out the awards, and it's not the same, whole glitz and glamour shindig that it is now.
They can sit in a conference room with rubber chicken just like the rest of us have to do our industry awards. All right. Well, thank you for listening. As always, we're at moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. Email us, leave a comment on any of the places that you find us. Our email address is moviesmatterpod@gmail.com. And remember, movies matter, but the Oscars don't. We'll see you next time.